What's up guys, Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with a strategy video, how to find value using recency bias. Now if you've been following the channel for a long time, you would hear us talk about recency bias quite a bit. Why? Because it's a real thing that impacts every player and their ADP. While all your league mates are going left, you go right. That's what recency bias is all about. Don't follow the trends, think on your own, do your research, and it'll pay off. So what is recency bias? Well, by definition, it is a person most easily remembering something that has happened recently, compared to remembering something that may have occurred a while back. Now that is the dictionary definition, but I really think it speaks for itself. The term itself is used a lot in the financial industry, but it directly translates to fantasy football, and very well I may add. If you think about it, it just makes sense. We analyze data and statistics to project future results. In layman's terms, being able to see through all the nonsense and take a player at his true value and not just at the value coming out of last year, that's going to be one of the biggest draft day advantages that you as a player can have. Now there are a few examples of recency bias that we are going to cover in this video. The first being week to week recency bias. This is where a player has had a bad week, potentially even in a good matchup, and then the owners overreact. Then you have positional group recency bias. This is where a position group finishes very strong the previous year or very weak the previous year, and an overreaction is made on a larger scale due to draft day ADPs. And then the final recency bias we're going to be discussing in this video is draft risk recency bias. This is where a player may be seen as either safe or risky based off the previous year as a sample size alone. Now since draft risk recency bias is the easiest one to cover, we're going to start there. So draft risk recency bias, just like injury prone narratives, it usually only takes 1 year of bad production or bad behavior to gain that character issue label. Similarly, it only takes 1 year of good production and good behavior to shed the character issue label as well. Now that's just to the general public. To me, 1 year, yeah, it's important. I want to know what they're out there, what they're doing, but I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket off of 1 year production. For example, a player like Amir Abdullah gets a bad rap for being an injury-prone player, and it's understandable because last year he was placed on IR after a week 2 foot injury. However, to the trained fantasy football player who does their research, they know how to research and they know what to look for. His true injury history states that Abdullah hadn't missed a game his entire college career. And although he had injuries in both his first and second year in the NFL, that is not enough for me to consider him a high injury risk player. So to me, that's not going to impact my decision on drafting Abdullah one bit. Now I've been hearing the same thing about a player coming out of Tennessee, Eric Decker. I'm hearing he's a draft risk due to injury, due to changing teams. Realistically, he's already made a jump to another team and succeeded. And in reality, excluding last year, he has played a minimum of 14 games per season since entering the league, including 3 16-game seasons and 2 15-game seasons. His age, yeah, it may be a factor, and I may consider that as part of why I would or would not draft him, but to mark him down as an injury risk and risky because he's changing teams, that's just not enough for me. I see big picture, not just last year. Now this type of recency bias can go the other way. A player may seem like a great pick based off of last year's performance. A good example of this would be Davante Adams from the Packers. Now he was extremely productive in the past season, scoring an astounding 246 PPR points for a wide receiver 1 finish. And the result is now he is shot all the way up in the draft boards. He's being drafted inside the top 20. If you ask me, that's essentially a large investment for a player who finished with 100 points and 104 PPR points the previous 2 years. That's not to say he doesn't have the ability to exceed the value that he's being drafted at. He does have Aaron Rodgers as his QB, but I think the risk is just not being spoken about enough. And this is where the recency bias comes in. It just goes to show you how we all can easily forget about unproductive seasons when you have a breakout type year like Davante Adams had. So next we have week to week recency bias. So let me ask you this, have you ever owned a player and started them in what was to be a good matchup only to be burnt with a horrible stat line? I think it's safe to say that we all have been there. Then what happens next? You vow to never start them again over another player on your roster, only to lock yourself in to the same lineup week over week. Now that is a huge mistake. We are in fact huge proponents of start your studs, but when it comes to these flex players, you have to have a short-term memory when it comes to players having bad weeks. It happens. Some good matchups on paper may not turn out to be so great when you break them down position by position. One way this is so easy to be seen is in daily fantasy. They give you the ownership percentages And when players bust the week before, you can immediately see the ownership percentages dip dramatically the following week. And we take full advantage of that. We play a lot of DFS, and having low ownership players is very key to winning tournaments in DFS, and it helps in GPP too. And for redraft, I think you all can agree that nothing feels better than putting in a player in your starting lineup that none of your league members have faith in, only to shove it back in their face when they post 20 or more points for the win. And one thing I can promise you that we will be doing to help you guys out is we are going to be watching a lot of tape during the regular season. We're going to be helping you guys identify which players are sabotaging your lineups and which ones will rebound in a big way. We really are strongly considering doing a podcast style of content for the in-season videos this year. If we do move forward with that, we can easily get this information over to you guys in time to set your lineups each week. At least that's a plan up until this point. So if you guys are interested in that, let us know in the comments section down below. Right now, everything's a little up in the air, but we're going to figure it out come the start of the season. That's enough about that. The last form of recency bias, arguably the most important form, is the positional group recency bias. And I don't think there is any better time to explain this one than the 2017 season. This one is huge. So here's a graph outlining the historical point differences between running backs and wide receivers in the past 4 years. If you've been following the channel for a long time, I know a lot of you are new. We have always been huge supporters of the RB0 draft strategy, even before 2015. Historically, wide receivers are just more consistent on a season-long basis, and if you look at the difference in points scored between RB1 and a wide receiver 1, they're really minimal. So when you factor in the risk of drafting RBs with the injury concerns, the running backs by committee, it really creates a risk-reward situation favoring the wide receivers. Now in 2016, it's a fact that the RB0 strategy really hit the mainstream, and everybody was drafting wide receivers. It made it extremely difficult to grab a well-rounded team when the top 30 wide receivers were going off in the top 50 picks. So you can really see this is kind of an example of positional group recency bias. What happened after that year? Well, really it was late round running backs galore. There were so many running backs in the middle to late rounds that were just exceeding value left and right. And that was directly because the wide receivers' ADPs were skyrocketing and these other running backs were falling. Then we all know what happened. The wide receivers had a down year as a whole, thus creating this perfect storm. And as a result, we're coming into the 2017 season where running backs are being valued much higher than they have been in recent years. And it's understandable, I can't argue that. The running backs did perform much better as a whole than the wide receivers did last year. But that was last year. You have to look at a larger sample size than that. The facts are the facts. Wide receivers are on the rise as a whole, and the workhorse running back is a thing of the past. So before we end this video, I want to leave you with this chart. It's showing the total points scored by the top 20 wide receivers since 2000. Clearly, you can see that we had an extreme dip in production for 2016, but you can rest assured that this will come back to the norm. One thing I can guarantee you is that the wide receivers are not going to tank again like they did last year. I have no problem taking wide receivers with my first picks. The more heavy people go to one position group, the better value you get at another. That's why I say when everyone goes left, you go right. Now don't get me wrong, having solid RBs is very important, but on this channel we are big supporters of finding value. And if I have the choice between a wide receiver I have ranked inside the top 10 and a running back that I have ranked outside the top 10, the choice is easy. I'll make up for not having a running back at this draft point somewhere later in the draft. I'm going to get value with these top picks. And if it just so happens to be 3 wide receivers, or if it happens to be 3 running backs, I'm okay with that. Just always go for value. So I hope you guys enjoyed. That's going to do it for this video. Please give this video a big thumbs up. We could really use all the likes we could get right now, so we really appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We post videos 5 days a week, and that's not going to stop until the season starts. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you on the next one.